On Wednesday, September 29th, 1976, the brand new sitcom Alice got a visit from the Gorton's fisherman, who revealed a closely guarded secret.
Jack's gay. Why?
That very same day, the movie Norman, Is That You? Opened with a storyline in which Sanford & Son's Red Fox discovers that his son is gay.
Norman used to be the all-American boy. Now, he has purple drapes.
This was just one day after a similar discovery on the season premiere of the show Family.
I got busted in a gay bar. Why would you go to a place like that?
And one day before, TV cop Barney Miller got a visit from two Greenwich Village regulars.
Supreme Court upholds anti-gay statutes.
9 old men who dress up in black robes and they say we're peculiar.
The same day they showed up on Barney Miller, The Nancy Walker Show introduced America to one of the first recurring gay characters on American television, and David Brenner's postponed to this day sitcom Snip was scheduled to debut with another recurring gay character. A week later, Bob Newhart's show got a gay patient.
Just what the world needs, a little more gaiety.
A month earlier, an innocent man went into hiding from the mob at a gay bathhouse in the movie The Ritz.
You are not my type. I just want to help you find yours. Hello!
And a month later, Lindy put everyone in their place in the movie Car Wash.
Honey, I am more man than you'll ever be, and more woman than you'll ever get.
And then Cloris Leachman's boyfriend on the show Phyllis came out.
I want everybody to know that I'm gay, and I have this woman to thank for it.
Meanwhile, David Bowie had just come out in Playboy as bisexual, Elton John was about to come out in Rolling Stone, Mary Hartman had just featured the first recurring gay married couple on television, the Rocky Horror Picture Show had just had its first midnight screening.
It's not easy having a good time.
There was so much queer culture in the air in 1976 that one cultural commentator wrote an article calling it the year of the
It's true, but he shouldn't say it.
And all that gayness reached its heaviest concentration during one super queer week in late September. So what happened? Hey everyone, I'm Matt. I make videos about pop culture, and the same year that America celebrated its bicentennial, a queer tidal wave swept across the nation, impacting music, film, theater, and particularly TV. It all culminated in the gayest week in television history. We're going to take a look at just what happened, and we're going to use the sitcom Alice as an example. First, a little background on Alice. It was a half-hour sitcom that premiered in 1976 based on the 1974 film Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. The movie was directed by Martin Scorsese, and it's a gritty, often violent story about a single mother working in a seedy diner.
But I'm not going to let anybody stop me this time!
Also, fun fact, it features the first known appearance of Laura Dern. For some reason, somebody thought this would be a great basis for a sitcom. And 2 years later, Alice began its regular run on CBS. The show took a very different approach from the movie. It's also about a single mom working in a diner, but we've gone from gritty to...
Smart women turn me on.
Male ducks turn you on.
The movie has the energy of Taxi Driver, the show's energy is more like Taxi.
I'm not talking about bicycles, I'm talking about bisexuals.
So am I.
Alice stars Linda Lavin as Alice, a wisecracking single mom and waitress, and also her no-nonsense friend Flo, who had an iconic 70s catchphrase.
Kiss my grit.
Fun fact, that was originally going to be Kiss My Honeydew, but nobody laughed, and they changed it. I don't know why Kiss My Grits is funnier, but it is. The first regular episode of Alice aired on September 29th, and it's entitled Alice Gets a Pass. We open on Mel, the diner's owner, informing the ladies that his old college friend Jack is coming to town. Jack's a former football player, and they're delighted to see that he's tall, strong, and handsome, leading to what I wish had become an iconic 70s catchphrase.
He can fill my closet with whipped cream anytime he wants.
By the way, Jack's played by Denny Miller. In the 50s, he was the first blonde Tarzan, and in the 90s, the Gorton's fisherman.
Do we know how to reel him in or what?
He and Alice hit it off, and they hang out a couple of times. He even gets along with their son Tommy, and Alice suggests that they go on a fishing trip together.
Would you like to take Tommy with you?
Hey, that's a great idea.
Can you guess where this is headed?
You'll figure it out.
Jack realizes that his get-togethers with Alice are starting to feel like dates, and he feels like he has to explain something to her.
I'm gay.
And at first, Alice handles the news pretty well. She's surprised, but she's not mean about it. She still wants to be his friend.
I felt you were the kind of person I could have an honest, upfront relationship with. Was I wrong?
No, certainly not.
Pretty good coming out for the 70s. Only Phyllis did it better.
I'm gay.
But after Jack leaves, Alice remembers that she just told him that he could take her son on a fishing trip. And while she's open to being friends with the gay guy, she's not sure she wants to let him spend time with her kid. Now, Alice wasn't the only person feeling anxious about children being exposed to queer people in the 1970s. Starting in the late 60s, more gay characters and stories started popping up in mainstream media than ever before. There were movies like The Boys in the Band, Cabaret, and The Gay Deceivers.
I may not know my flowers, but I know a bitch when I see one.
There were queer storylines on TV shows like Marcus Welby, Mary Tyler Moore, and All in the Family.
Why don't you call me Mr.?
Disco and glam rock introduced a queer sensibility to music, with artists like Sylvester finding mainstream success. And that was all happening at the same time as queer political advances. It was the time of the first pride parades, homosexuality being declassified as a mental illness, and a handful of states decriminalizing homosexuality. But not everyone was happy about that. Conservatives claimed that exposure to gay people would harm children, and they demanded that TV networks censor gay content, along with any sex and violence. At first, networks resisted. But then in 1974, NBC went a little too far and broadcast a TV movie that featured a particularly shocking same-sex assault. Congress and the FCC took notice and threatened to pull the broadcaster's licenses. In response, NBC, CBS, and ABC had to scramble to prove that they could self-regulate. So in late '74, they created something they called the Family Hour. It was a block of programming from 8 to 9 p.m. that they promised would be free of any objectionable content. And it would have warnings about anything that might offend viewers. That included sex, violence, and gay characters.
My job is to make sure this program is morally upright and cultural and wholesome.
You got your work cut out for you, Bird.
The Family Hour went into effect in the fall season of '75, and at last, America's children were safe. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to work. So while Congress and broadcasters were concerned about the safety of America's children, so too was Alice worried about the safety of her own kid. Should she let Tommy go on that fishing trip? Well, the next day at work, she's stressed and distracted, and she finally takes Flo aside to explain why.
I went out with a guy I really dug, and he turned out to be gay.
What?
Alice doesn't mind that he's gay, but just like those concerned conservatives, she's worried that he might be a threat to her kid.
I asked Jack to take Tommy fishing with him, but now I'm not sure I want him to go.
Oh, you mean because Jack is,
On one hand, Alice has a feeling her anxiety's unfounded.
Maybe you're right. I'm just being silly and narrow-minded.
Of course you are.
But on the other hand, she just can't shake that anxiety.
So what are you gonna do?
Tell Tommy he can't go.
Good.
Okay, she made her choice. But the next day, she starts regretting it.
I'm just upset. I told Tommy he couldn't go, but I didn't tell him why.
After the Family Hour went into effect in 1975, the TV industry had regrets of their own. Executives quickly discovered that it was a huge burden, for a couple of reasons. For one thing, banishing all sex, violence, and homosexuality from the 8 to 9 block meant that they had to keep changing the schedule, moving shows from one time slot to another depending on content. The Family Hour was also a huge flop with audiences. Ratings plummeted, and a lot of the shows created to fill the Family Hour slot were almost immediately canceled. But one of the biggest problems was how it tied the hands of creators. Networks kept interfering with the shows, forcing them to cut even innocuous content, including anything gay. When the show Phyllis wanted to have an episode where a gay character comes out, CBS told producers to replace the word gay with a limp wrist gesture.
Oh, be nice!
Meanwhile, movies, theater, and music were having a gay old time. 1975 was a big year for queer themes in films, with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Saturday Night at the Baths, and The Naked Civil Servant.
You cannot touch me now. I am one of the stately homos of England.
It was also the year of A Chorus Line and Boy Meets Boy, and just a few years after a gay character appeared in the musical Coco, played by Renee Auberjonois. That's Odo from Star Trek.
Every 16 hours, I turn into a liquid.
I could swim.
There's also a musical called, and this is real, Let My People Come, featuring a song with the title, I'm Gay.
I'm gay.
For more about all those shows, check out my Patreon. I just posted a bonus video about all the queer stuff happening in Broadway in the 1970s. '75 was also a big gay year for music, with the release of Bohemian Rhapsody by the band Queen, which, thanks to frontman Freddie Mercury, had a super queer aesthetic. Also released this year, I Was Born This Way. Not the Lady Gaga song, but the disco anthem that she said inspired her song decades later.
Yes, I'm gay. Change the culture, the fact I was born this way. This
was all accompanied by a huge surge in real-life queer activism. The first prides were taking off, openly queer people were being elected to office for the first time, many states were decriminalizing homosexuality, including California, where a lot of TV and film was made. This was all great material for TV shows, or at least it would have been if they could have used it. Behind the scenes, queer activists were meeting with producers and pressuring them to feature queer stories on their shows. And producers wanted to do that. Some shows, like Barney Miller, had gay scripts ready to shoot. But the Family Hour was standing in the way, to the aggravation of just about everyone. Finally, the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, and producer Norman Lear himself sued the networks to get the Family Hour overturned. The whole thing was turning into a huge source of frustration. Back on the show, Alice is feeling increasingly frustrated and distracted at work as she continues to regret telling Tommy he couldn't go fishing with Jack. Jack's frustrated too, and he comes to the diner to ask her what happened.
Why aren't you letting Tommy go? Is it because I'm gay?
Yes.
She's swamped with orders, so he helps her in the kitchen while they talk, which seems a little unsanitary, but if you can't trust the Gordon's fisherman, who can you trust?
Trust the Gordon's fisherman.
Alice explains her reasoning.
Part of being a parent is protecting your child, and I'd just rather that Tommy didn't go at this time.
That may sound reasonable at first, but he asks her to consider why she thinks Tommy needs to be protected from him.
If I were straight and you had a 12-year-old daughter, would you trust me with her?
Yes, I suppose I would.
There's no difference, Alice.
That puts things in perspective for Alice. She realizes that her anxiety about her son being around a gay person isn't based on anything real, but on prejudice. She knows Jack isn't a threat, but she treated him like he is. And to his credit, he doesn't tell her what to do.
I don't agree with your decision about Tommy, but I understand your right to make it, and I respect that.
Thanks.
But he also doesn't have to. As he's on his way out...
Take Tommy with you.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
What made her change her mind? Well, here's how she explains it.
When I told Tommy he couldn't go, I just felt awful. Especially after the way he looked at me, and then the way you looked at me, and now the way I look at me.
It's clear. She was wrong. Her gay friend wasn't a threat at all, and preventing her kid from spending time with him was just making everyone unhappy for no reason. As the 1975 season wore on, the TV industry was coming to a similar realization. The Family Hour kept screwing up the schedule and chasing viewers away. Meanwhile, that Norman Lear lawsuit was proceeding through the courts, getting close to a ruling that everyone knew might overturn the whole Family Hour altogether. Finally, in the autumn of '76, it was time for the start of the new TV season, the time of year when ABC, CBS, and NBC launched all their new shows all at the same time. And this year, it seemed like all three were placing bets on whether the Family Hour would last. NBC, whose TV movie kicked off the congressional investigation that led to the Family Hour, held back on putting anything gay in their premieres. The network had originally planned on launching a show called Snip, which featured a gay hairdresser, but at the last second, they postponed it, first by a week, then a few months, and then indefinitely. To this day, it's never aired in the US. And when it came to premieres, there was nothing queer on NBC. But ABC and CBS went as hard as they could. It started on Tuesday with the season premiere of the ABC show Family, in which a teenager finds out that one of his friends is gay.
I knew guys were supposed to have homosexual feelings, but I knew with me it was something deeper.
Then on Wednesday, this Alice episode on CBS.
New comedy, Alice.
On Thursday, the Nancy Walker Show premiered on ABC. That featured a recurring gay character played by the actor Ken Olsen, who said in interviews that he didn't like labels, but he'd had bisexual experiences. Sounds like fun. That same night on ABC, the sitcom Barney Miller, which is set at a police station in Greenwich Village, aired an episode in which two gay characters help out at the station.
What did you do to the coffee?
Well, there's nothing special. It just takes a unique talent.
I was afraid it was something like that.
And not to be outdone, the next week on CBS, the Bob Newhart Show added a recurring gay character to the therapy group. I have a whole video about that episode.
Do you care for coffee, tea, fruit, coffee?
So why was there such a sudden explosion of queer content in such a short span of time? Well, I think there were a couple of things going on. In the early 70s, there was a rise in primetime shows that depicted sexual or violent content, and that prompted a backlash from conservatives who used the threat of pulling licenses to force the networks to self-censor, and caught up in that censorship were shows that included queer characters and storylines. But it turns out there was just no putting that gay genie back in the bottle.
Let's work with me here.
Not only did networks, producers, and audiences hate the new rules, but queer content continued to blossom in other entertainment. Over the next year, TV networks felt more pressure than ever to bring queer characters back, and their first chance to make it happen was the start of a new season when they could launch all new shows and shake up the old ones. So, when the '76 season began, what did audiences see? A week that was front-loaded with new and returning shows full of characters and storylines that the networks knew would get attention. It was a perfect storm of conditions that put gay characters in the spotlight all week long, and then again, and again, and again over the next couple of months. And whatever happened to the Family Hour? Well, a few weeks after these shows aired, a judge in California ruled that it was never even legal to begin with. Turns out that because the FCC forced the networks to adopt it by threatening to pull licenses, the FCC was actually violating the First Amendment. Whoops. And just like that, Family Hour was gone for good. So, at the end of the episode of Alice, she tells Tommy about Jack.
Tommy, Jack Newhouse is a homosexual.
Here's his response.
From the way kids talk, I thought you could always tell. I don't care, though.
For the brief time that it lasted, that Family Hour treated gay characters like they were some kind of threat to kids. But just like there was no reason to stop Tommy from going on the fishing trip, stopping kids from seeing queer characters on TV didn't protect anyone, because those characters were never a threat to begin with. Banning them just made everyone unhappy. The shows, the networks, the viewers. After all that hand-wringing about protecting kids, both on this one show and in real life, the fact is, when kids find out that gay people exist, their reaction is always pretty much the same. So what? In making this video, I found a lot of great stories about the tons of shows and movies and songs and plays with queer themes from around this time. I have videos here on YouTube about some of them, like the show Phyllis and the Bob Newhart Show, which aired later in the same season, and I'm posting a bunch of bonus videos on Patreon about some of the others. You can check that out at patreon.com/MattBaum. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got an announcement to make.